To close out this year's conference, we're finishing on a high and powerful and thought-provoking keynote presentation. We're delighted to welcome Katharine McLennan, CEO and clinical psychotherapist, who brings a unique blend of leadership expertise, neuroscience insight, and human connection to the conversation around apprenticeships and traineeships. Katharine will take us into a deep dive into some of the biggest challenges we face across the sector, from understanding the minds of today's school leavers to recruiting, assessing and managing emerging talent. She'll also explore the growing impact of mental health and the complex role of artificial intelligence is playing in shaping future skills, especially in times of uncertainty. So this keynote promises to challenge our thinking, shift perspectives and leave us with some fresh ideas to take back into our organisations. Please welcome Katharine McLennan.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Despite my accent, I've been in Australia since 1990, when the Education Minister Dawkins declared that we should have job-ready graduates. And anybody remember that? I've got any age. And so I've been following that. I've been not necessarily CEO, but I have been Chief People Officer of CBA. I've been Chief People Officer of Cochlear, and designed an International Leadership Academy for QBE. But most of the time, I have been advising CEOs in the corporate sector about people and culture amidst a context of strategy. So I'm constantly thinking about the future, and I'm thinking about it in the sense of people and culture and what we need to learn and how our cultures need to be, and I'm fascinated with it. I studied history, which is going to be clear in undergraduate, but I also studied neuroscience, and I created all kinds of trouble with rats who still are taking revenge on me. I call it the rat's revenge when I start feeling my own anxiety. So, where are we? We're not in Kansas anymore. It's very clear. In the last 2 years, I've been running a podcast, as you do in this age, and I had the honor of going to business school. Oh, this is going to sound a bit arrogant, but at Stanford, we graduated in 1995 as 27, 28-year-olds, and we're having our 30th reunion this year. So I decided to have a podcast that would have two guests, one from my class, 1995, and one from the class that just graduated, 2025. And it was a marvelous conversation because the mutual learning that went on was exquisite. We have so much to learn from the generations that are come in. And I was looking around the room and I was thinking, do we have anybody that is between 15 and 30? There we go. We have one. You're the teacher. You're the teacher. And this is very, very important. They have so much to teach. You might be interested in this class at Stanford was the first MBA class to be allowed to use ChatGPT for everything. And so they are embracing AI, and I think that's very important. So the historian in me would say, let's look at where we've been in order to reflect on where we might go. And so, industrial age. For those of you who are baby boomers, usually around over 60, for those who are just under 60, we grew up and work in the industrial age. And this was an age, maybe it didn't look quite this grim, but it was certainly an age of command and control. And I remember as a strategy consultant, taking your watch and then giving your watch back to time keep and drive efficiency and all of that. We entered the information age, interestingly, I think in 1995, when Netscape went public. And Netscape was the first internet service provider. And I happened to be in Silicon Valley at the time. One of my classmates founded eBay and another one founded Hotmail. I don't know exactly what I was doing, but I kind of missed that ride. But the information age changed everything. And so if you look at the vista is something I've been writing quite a lot about this, where we're looking at volume, really clear instructions that can be replicated, standardization, timekeeping, authority. It changed. Virtualization. We could start imagining through data. Instantaneity. Okay, anybody want to say that? Instantaneous searchability. We could start getting information at our fingertips. And that was mind-blowing for some of the companies that we did. We had chief knowledge officers at that point. And from autocracy to technocracy, we went. And from the analytics just became huge. So which vista are we now, though? I guarantee we are not in the information era anymore. Information is a commodity. You can, if you're not on it, I've been on ChatGPT all day today, as I am on it all day. Every time you guys say another acronym, I look it up, and I understand how your industry works. And I think we're up to about 400 acronyms. But I also use it to help my creative thought and to think about how I put these thoughts together. But the question I'm giving to all the clients I work with and the writing and the reflecting I'm doing is we are at a choice point, a serious choice point. We can collapse into isolation, if that's the next I word, or we can catalyze ingenuity. And it is a very, very exquisitely important choice. I've been examining all the phenomenally not scary politics from my country of origin, and the economics, and the technology, and we are at a choice. And again, if you look at the vistas, this is about void. It's not having a strategy. It's not having a vision. You guys have spent all day listening and hopefully fragmenting in your mind a vision of what this could be. Over here in isolation, there is no visioning go. We are overwhelmed. There is inertia. There are silos. Silos predominate everywhere. I've been across the academic. I've spent a bit of time at UTS, particularly with the business school. I've been across worked for the federal government. I've worked in corporates, worked in NGOs, and the silos dominate our thinking. Our education didn't show us how to create synergy, which is the other one. And of course, we're beginning to see some very frightening tyranny and apathy in their people. So what can we do? We can think about catalyzing ingenuity, vision, intuition. If AI is artificial intelligence, we still have something that AI cannot replicate, which is human wisdom. And you can call that intuition, but it's wisdom. One of the things I do for fun is study our ancient people's wisdom, because we keep forgetting with all the intelligence we've had. And so how do we do that? Trust. How do we trust each other? How do we trust the data? How do we trust that we're being looked after if we're an apprentice? And authenticity. We want to be known for who we are. And I was reflecting on one of the terms that us Gen X's use is work-life balance, because work-life balance was a big deal to us. There is no work-life balance. Work-life is one thing. It doesn't mean that it's stressful. It doesn't have to be stressful. But who we are authentically is what we do. We merge all kinds of the day. Look at your day. It's not doing one and the other. It's not an 8 to 5, and our generation was typewriters to PCs, so we did have to finish at 6 p.m. most days, and then we did go home. That is not the case anymore. So how do we become real? So which vista for apprenticeship? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to break the room a little bit in. You don't not like movement. There's 3 things that I wanted to look at. A lot of the things that you've talked about today. The first one is attracting this talent, the apprenticeship in an AI world. You've heard some pretty cool things. I was so delighted to see Indeed here, being head of HR for CBA and head of HR for, listen to me, HR, that's a very mechanical term, people and culture. I'm so glad to see a company like Indeed emerge. I mean, we are the ones that were getting all the applications. Let's say we were hiring for an accountant. 1,000 people would do, and we'd use a very antiquated machine to go through and pick out the exact credential that that person had, and we missed out on incredible talent. I can guarantee you. The AI is phenomenally interesting to me. So let's see. These 2 rows of table, you're going to be thinking about the attract. And all I want you to do, you can actually write to each other, if your mind's wondering. The one thing that you would change in the way we attract apprenticeships, and the one thing that you would stop. So let's make that start. The one thing that you would start that's not being done in the apprenticeship system in terms of attracting, and the one thing that we stop. And I might ask 1 or 2 people to come along when that, just think about, just make it easy. You can dash notes to your neighbor if you like. Let's have these 3 rows. You guys are going to be developing with the brain in mind. We know so much about neuroscience now that it is unacceptable for learning professionals not to understand how brains work, and not only brains, but bodies and sleep and even breath. You can even do an exercise right now to figure out where your breath is. So many of us are breathing here without a full breath, which means even our oxygen is not getting our clear thought. And I go back to a lot of executives, I go back to breathing, water, and sleep. And then we get to food. And then we can get to the training and everything else. But let's get these guys, what's one thing we can start doing that we're not doing in developing, training our apprentices? And what's things can we stop doing? So you guys, I'm going to come back to you. So where did I go? Where did I go? I came over here. So I think it's the last 2 are going to be talking about once we can attract the apprenticeship, once we can start developing the apprentices, how do we actually strengthen their emotional intelligence? Because it's not just about the brain, as it turns out. And we've known that for years. It's just that if you grew up in the old days, it wasn't part of our language. Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, and that came out, I think it was the late 90s, if I'm not correct. Might have been mid-90s. And that was the first time that it was in our lexicon, emotional intelligence. So I'm going to come back to you guys. So I'm going to black out the screen if I can, or you guys can do it. Let's see. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about attraction. You guys have talked a lot about that. How do we attract talent in the world? Let's talk about generations. I won't ask anybody to stand up, but if you are a baby boomer, you're generally a little bit over 60 or above. So anybody can yell out, how did a baby boomer find a job? What was the main, how did they find one? What's up?
We got mics too.
You can get mics? Okay, great. Come on. Quick. How did they find one?
Asking a friend or a family member.
And you're the youngest person in the audience speaking for the baby boomers. That is fantastic. So how else?
We've got some other mics at the back, so put your hands up. We've got one at the back here.
Quick.
I've got a lot of...
Newspaper, classified ads, absolutely, yes. The CES.
So the
You go
Commonwealth
to the
Employment
local
Service, there's a
CES.
few of us in here that worked there before.
Yes.
Actually, I've got a lot of cousins in that age gap,
Yep.
and a lot of them did TAFE, or whatever it is back then, and employers actually reached out, and there was a board, there was a job board.
Job board, exactly. Job boards were fantastic. What else? Anything else? Okay, we got to keep that in mind, because we don't lose that, we start gaining it. And so we need to forget some things, and then we need to keep things that worked. Okay, Generation X is anybody in the room that's generally 45 to 60. Generation X, so if the boomers were, let's call them the analog natives, we can call them letters and line telephones. The Generation X, we could call them remote control natives. We could call them the latchkey kids. That was the first time that mothers generally went back to work in a big way. We were the ones that started on typewriters, and we ended up having to learn the PCs. So it's an interesting generation. How did we attract? How did we find jobs? Friends and family, absolutely, always. How else? What's that? Newspaper, absolutely. I found quite a few jobs when I came here. Word of mouth. Word of mouth. School, absolutely. Knocking on doors. I love it, knocking on doors. But did we know that anything that we could possibly imagine? I would think that, let's say I was good at, what was the first video game that we used to play?
Donkey Kong.
Pac-Man. I was good at Pac-Man. Could I actually go out into the world and say, because I'm good at this, I might be good at that? Could we actually, and at that point, I'm going to be generalist, we had jobs where you could actually say 3 words in a sentence, or 4. I am a dentist. I am a carpenter. I am a psychologist. And there are very well-known jobs. Those of you who are counselors and careers, I don't know how you do it. I might have some ideas, actually. But our school counselors used to give us do you remember the inventories that we used to take? And we would match those inventories to jobs. There was a book going around, I think it was in Australia as well, What Color is Your Parachute? Anybody hear remember that? Anyway, so it's actually not a complex world, so to speak, but it was limited. There was very little that you knew outside your world that you grew up in and what you could possibly do. There was no information coming in. So if you are 30 to 45, you are in Generation Y, otherwise known as the millennials. And they are the internet natives. And like I said, in 1995, when the internet really came alive, these guys have always had it. They've always had information coming at them. Now, how did they find jobs, generally?
Social media.
Social media. LinkedIn came in, and it's gone fantastic. How else? Online platforms, absolutely. So Seek was one. Who was before Seek? I'm trying to remember. Yes, Monster, yes. What were the other? So how else would they find it? Yep, still family. So if you think about these guys, they did have access to the internet, and the internet was a form of looking information. But could you actually put a question? Let's form a question. If we put a question into Google and we said, hey, I really am good with my hands. I love to think about the world of nature. I love to interact with my grandmother. Could Google actually play back what jobs I could find or how I would train for that? No. No, you have to know exactly what you're looking for when you use Google. And even then, with the advertising, and you all know this, with the advertising reliance on what they have, you'll only get the people that have advertised the most sophisticated. So that is not great, especially for our young people. You'll find a lot of the young people don't use Google. they don't use a lot of the internet. They don't use email very often. They don't use, well, we know they don't use the telephone. So talk to somebody, oh my God. So let's go then to the generation that perhaps we are talking about now. And when I asked you if there were 15 to 30-year-olds in the audience, you need to get some 15 to 30-year-olds in the audience. They will be the ones that will help drive your policies. They will be the ones that actually can create pathways for you, that can tell us the jobs that we're going to have that don't exist today. I guarantee if you start talking to them and give them the ability to start telling you what they're being skilled at, what they're learning, our minds will be blown away. I love how you guys are getting together, but they will supersede that because many of the things that you talked about today, I was sitting back there and just plugging it into ChatGPT all day, whatever you want to use, and I was asking, what do we know about this in the UK? What do we know about this in Sweden? What is Japan doing about this? Oh, that's a fantastic idea. That's not, the ideas are going to be there. The far out technology that maybe Indeed represented is already here. So in Attract, we can think about, I don't know, you pick anyone. We can think about the way they are going to need to engage, and they love it when they start saying, hey, I love what I do in, what do people do in high school? I love what I did when I made my model rocket. I loved what I did when I played the guitar and got the band together. How about this? And not only that, it's going to be live. They will get their influence from TikTok. And I'm going to make sure I read out a couple of TikTok influencers in a minute that have huge influence on what people will do in the apprenticeship world. I'll call out a few names that you might be interested. They want to be part of that. They want to speak live. They want to be entertained. They want to see the world of plumbing. And I think it's called the Sydney Plumber Chick. And she's got, is that right? She's got hundreds of thousands of followers. And she's making it come alive. And those are the kinds of things we need to think about, how these guys learn about, hey, this is a really cool job. And how do I need to prepare for it? These are what you guys call the influencers. It's huge, and influencing is an art. And those guys know how to do it. We don't. I have a ton of people that I hire from companies like Upwork, from 5RR, if you don't know, 5R, from Airtasker, that are all in this age range, that have not necessarily got credentials, but they've taught themselves in communities to do all the kinds of things that our world is now looking for, which is the influence side. So how do we attract? How do we attract these people? It's not the way that the baby boomers, the Gen X, the Gen Y, and the Gen Z and the Gen Y. It's totally different. The Gen Z, we'll call them social media natives. Anybody that happens to be under 15 here, okay, not. But your children, if you have under 15 children, they are Generation Alpha. They're totally going to be AI natives. So you can imagine the kind of world that we grew up in does not look like the world that they grew up in. How are we going to attract them? We have to think like them. They have to be part of your organizations. They need to tell you and brainstorm with you more than any other client. You've got to spend time with them. That is my wish. So the Attract guys, I'm going to come back to you, but you got to think one thing you're going to stop and one thing that you're going to start. All right, developing. Where are my developers? Let's see. I think you're 1, 2, 3. Am I 1, 2, 3 here? All right, so developers. What do we know about the way we develop our brains? This time, we're really interested. In the industrial age, we wanted to know, whether you could use your hands and your legs in the factories. I'm exaggerating. But with neuroscience now, and I studied that in undergraduate, since then, which I hate to say is 35 years, the discoveries by neuroscience have just gone crazy. We know that. We know that the functional MRI machines, we know that the EEGs, we know that we can see the brain in action whilst learning. And so I can give you a few things just to kind of whet your appetite, but that just give us some thoughts about how we know how people are learning, and yet we're not applying it to the way we learn in some of our pathways. These days, when I'm kind of into a new part of my life, but when I was hiring heads of learning and development, I was looking, yes, for the org psychs perhaps, but I was also looking for people who were fundamentally curious about what are the best conditions that we learn. And it's changing. You guys have been talking about that. But let's talk about some of the neuroscience that's involved. We have this thing, you can touch your forehead while we're here, you're touching your prefrontal cortex. The neuroscientists called this overloaded, that's right. I'm just trying to think, who's the big bear? Goldilocks. So they call it the Goldilocks of the brain because it does get overloaded. And it needs the perfect environment in order to work. It's the slow part of our brain, but it's the part of our brain that prioritizes, that plans, that can order things, that can do the spreadsheets. Not necessarily where the great creativity goes, but we are all suffering from ADHD. It's not just the formal people that have that title, being ADHD, where there's so much evidence that the attention deficit that we're facing is really a problem. And I can speak for myself, taking a mobile phone to bed is not a good idea. And I won't ask how many people do that, but it is killing us in terms of the health of this mind and the ability to distinguish what a death threat and what not a death threat is. Our bodies are being riddled by cortisol and other stress hormones constantly. And if you sleep under 6 hours, you are causing yourself enormous amounts of brain damage all the time. Don't tell me, I can get by in 4 hours of sleep. I will show your brain in a functional MRI, and I'll show you all the spots that you're not getting a look in. In fact, I think I was just looking at today that somebody that constantly gets less than 5 hours of sleep, they might as well have a 0.05% alcohol level when they come to work the next day. They're that impaired. So this is starting to get really important. How do we get the best conditions for the prefrontal cortex? It's really hard, and that's where we learn. Where do we learn? We learn, EEG tells us, we learn in different wavelengths. Where do you guys learn? What do you think of your newest thoughts? Where are your newest thoughts? Come, when you get a aha, where are you? In the shower, when you're asleep. The number one answer? In the shower. Why is that? Because our brains are in slower brainwave modes. They're not in the high beta brainwaves that we are when we're running between emails. They are actually in the slower brainwaves. You guys are a bit in alpha, so you're daydreaming about what you're going to eat for dinner tonight and who you're going to see and the nice person that sat next to you at dinner last night and when can I get out of here? Quick! But the alpha brainwave is a really important one. The scientists show that it has to be present right before you get a aha, because if it's not, you don't get a aha. And we need creativity in our young people as much as we need creativity in our elderly population. So that's an indication. I've talked about sleep. I've talked about where creativity comes from. A lot of the learning and development professionals are really getting educated and in fact collaborating with neuroscientists now all the time. And that becomes fascinating because whilst I think a lot of the things that we know our grandmothers probably told us and our great-grandmothers told us, particularly about water, sleep, and breathing, we're learning about how to develop this. And I think the micro-credentials is fascinating to us. It means that there's a completely different way to learn. And in the old days, when we were recruiting for these large corporates, this is Australia specific, by the way, we'd look at the high school that you went to, okay, check. We then looked at the university degrees, and we said, okay, well, that can be an accountant. That can be a financial controller. This one can be an HR. But not what I'm seeing now. I was head of people and culture globally for Cochlear. And, you know, okay, we hired biomedical engineers. Yes, we needed them to have the degree. But I can tell you that the people that we actually brought that weren't necessarily university qualified was always looking for those guys. Some of the people on the manufacturing floor became our best inventors. And it wasn't because they had a degree, it was because of the way they could think and imagine. And so I started to get our guys and gals in the recruiting department to start getting to know people and start looking at other ways besides send your resume into Seek and we will use an algorithm to find whether you can have a job or not. That is just not working. But it is so much volume. So how do you do that? And that's the phenomenally interesting thing about AI with the micro-credentials. Can AI allow us to start gathering faster than we've ever known people to show us what are the skills that are out there? This is why I loved seeing Indeed. But how do we make it a really personal? I'm going to look, Carolyn, how do I make my relationship with you as personal as I can. So you can tell me your life story. You can tell me what you've loved doing in high school, what you love doing with your friends, what you think you can imagine. And I can start working with you. Hey, you have potential. And I'm so glad they used that term potential because it's my favorite word. We have this kind of, in the early 2000s, we had a very mechanical way of looking at talent. We had this matrix called performance versus potential. I don't know if you guys use that still, the 9 box, you know, you were very well performed, but you really don't have any potential. Potential is an art, and you create the right conditions for people to have potential. And what's interesting about this generation, the younger generation, they know so much more about their potential because they're so exposed to all these ideas that are coming in all the time. And if you allow them the permission to actually start telling us what jobs we're going to need and how to actually train them, we have an amazing opportunity to learn. And I think that is incredibly important. And that ability to talk, to get on. We use, in our generation, maybe Generation Y, we use Reddit. I don't know if people use Reddit for ideas and everything. They're starting to use a thing called Discord as an example. I don't know if anybody's been on there. It came from the gaming population. And the reason why Discord is taking off, it's not passive. You don't put an idea down and you wait for somebody to respond to that. You know that at 3 o'clock, people are going to be getting on to start talking about the future of the apprenticeship industry. So you get on and you have real live conversations, and they love it. And technology allows us to do that. So when we're thinking about development, about how we actually have our people learn, what are we going to start and what are we going to stop? Last topic is, third topic, is once they're learning, we found them. I heard about the dropout rates. But one of the saddest parts of our society, and it's the reason I went back to go training, let's see, what am I now? At 35, when I was starting to work with executives, these are unofficial statistics, so don't quote them, but I have coached hundreds and hundreds of executives. Here's my statistics. 1/3 are on antidepressant. That's about the population. Why is that? Because we don't make enough serotonin, generally. I'm exaggerating. But we don't make enough serotonin. We don't have lifestyles that make this neurotransmitter and other neurotransmitters. Another third probably should be on antidepressants, but they use other means. They use 2 biggest ones in corporate, don't know about the apprenticeship system, are alcohol and cocaine. One high, one low, and it's prevalent. I'm sorry, it is prevalent. And those addicts are people that are running our organizations, and they are the ones that are creating the bullying, the crazy, and it's crazy. And they're using the addiction to get them through, but it's not getting them through, it's killing the organization. So we're dealing with a mental health crisis, I know, absolutely, in the corporate sector. And I was sitting there with my ChatGPT looking at the mental health crisis with our children are growing up, and I bet, you need to think about it, I bet every single person in this room will know at least one person between the age of 10 and, let's say, 25 that has had serious mental issues. I have a family member that had to leave high school and go, and it was serious depression. She spent 1.5 years in U-Space at St. Vincent's, which is a wonderful place, but set up because our youth are suffering. She's now a great speaker for Headspace because she's learned how to cope. She went to TAFE to get her finish high school. She decided for some reason economics was a phenomenally interesting, so she's now an economist, go figure. But she actually said that learning from TAFE was way more useful than all the things that she did at her degree. The reason being it was so pragmatic and so real world. But mental health gets in the way. And we were talking about the compensation, the workers' compensation system being also in people and culture, absolutely escalating costs, with huge tails. Like these people, in terms of they don't come back right away. It is not like breaking a leg. They don't come back, and it's going to continue to escalate. So what do we do with helping our people? And I was talking earlier to one of our people, GTO, about the mentoring they're doing. And learning how to mentor is quintessential. Who learned how to mentor in high school? Anybody? Anybody? Coach teams, do anything, mentor each other? No one learned how to mentor in high school. Are we teaching people to mentor now in high school? A little bit? Peer support, thank God. Peer support is one of the #1 things that will help this. And this is why I think really setting up those networks, because not only will it help in mental health, the peer, they know so many things, and that's why they love connecting to each other real time. The ideas that these guys are building real time are just phenomenal. So mental health, community. There was Dr. Craig Hassett at Monash University, I've always enjoyed listening to, and he's from different times. He's been in charge of the interns medical program at Monash. And he would say, I'm going to go quote, but between depression and fatigue, that's easy, there'd be, at some point in their internship, the doctors would be, let's say, 90% of them would face depression. And at that time, when they're depressed, they're 6 times likely to make an error in medication. So always ask your doctor how they're feeling when they're giving you medication. But anyway, so what I love about what Craig put, we all love acronyms. You guys love acronyms, I love acronyms. Let's see if I can get it. He called a program that he put together for the doctors that had brought the depression down remarkably. And again, it goes back to our ancient wisdom. He called it essence. The first one was education. And it wasn't so much the education that we're talking about today, but it's education about life, and education about our elders, and education about what purposes. The S one was spirituality. It didn't have to be religion, but it had to be meaning. What was the meaning in being a doctor for these people? The S one, gosh, this is where I'm going to start losing. I'll come back to that. But the E one was exercise. We're not moving our body. I'm so glad, the carpenters are pretty, I would bet they're going to be the wisest of us all, the ones that are moving. We are moving less and less and less, and therefore our brains are completely overtaxed. He was big on exercise. The next one, N, nutrition. Food matters more than ever. Our brains, spent quite a bit of time over the last decade or so looking at the gut and the brain, and it's now absolutely recommended. The C is community. And how am I going to get the E? Goodness gracious, it'll come. But he put together a program that was so simple but it was so integral to the mental health of these doctors and the way they thought and the way they were able to be the doctors they wanted to be. So that's about mental health. All right, so we got 12 minutes. So this group, we're going to do what to start and what to stop. One thing to start, one thing to stop, and how we're going to attract apprentices. This group, I'm losing those two. These 3 are going to do one thing to start and one thing to stop in the way we develop apprentices. We can think about the brain, but it doesn't have to be based on the brain. Something we're doing that just ain't working. And what would we start doing? And then 1, 2, 3. And then these 3, just at your table, one thing we can start and one thing we must stop in the mental health realm, and sustaining and making sure our people are not only learning and we're attracting them, but they're staying because they're mentally robust. Take a few minutes and I'm going to do some cold calling afterwards.
Microphone.
Okay, we've got roving microphones, really easy questions. We're going to start with attract over here, and if someone doesn't raise their hand, I will just, cold call. Anybody want to raise their hand? One thing to stop on attraction. What do we have to do what do we stop that we're doing now for apprentices? Have we got microphones roaming? Yes, we do.
Well, maybe you need to reverse what you said.
No, you talk. No, you.
Oh, no, you talk.
Oh, talk, just talk. That's what I do.
Is it on?
Okay, one thing we're going to stop in the attraction game.
Stop the 1,000 loopholes that apprentices have to go through.
Jump in.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the biggest loophole that they have to jump through? Getting a job, but what in that process? Do you reckon? What do you think? Just pick one, anyone. What's a huge one? CVs? Testing, psychometric testing? LLN, okay, great. Which stands for? Literacy and numeracy. Now, isn't that fascinating? If we started doing some future work on literacy and numeracy, what is artificial intelligence going to do, and what is human wisdom going to do? That's going to change. I guarantee it. And does having literacy and numeracy and a very high IQ guarantee you will be successful in this new world? No. IQ it will never be a holdback, but artificial intelligence is IQ. So you guys have already nailed a lot of it, but what is left that cannot be replaced? And I still believe there is, especially as we get older, the human wisdom component. Yes, you should be hiring people over 60, absolutely. I went on a campaign in Cochlear to find them in any which way. Some of our engineers that actually founded or discovered the implants were some of our best employees, and we got them back to work with the young. But what else? What else? What do we need to start doing or stop doing, you guys? Not just this table. Come on. The peanut galleries. Come on.
I think we need, I don't know if I need a mic. I think we need to stop comparing apprenticeship pathways and university pathways because they almost get played off against each other. So I think we need to look at the fact that neither is more superior than the other, and they are just two different interchangeable pathways that can be undertaken throughout someone's career journey.
Okay, you guys have spoken that a lot, but the question is how. We won't go through how. How? In my generation X, absolutely. Going to university was thought as superior. In this generation, especially in my country of origin, we can't afford sending our children to university. We just can't afford it. And by the way, the economy can't wait for them to go through 4 years. What we're seeing, if they are going to go to university, they may go 2 years whilst they're going to TAFE, whilst they're going to other places to grab different types of credentials that are way more useful here and now. Yes, the regulated industries of doctors and accountants and everything still need their so-called stamp, but how much of that will be even relevant when artificial intelligence can give us so much of that knowledge? So yes and no, and I don't know anything about the world you live in. I get that the status is important. In fact, status, when we don't get the status we think we should get, our brains just go nuts. That's another story. But status, I get that. But how do we recognize the incredible contribution these people will make, even at 16? Some of the 16-year-olds I've been speaking about have taught me so much about where the economy is going and where the industry is going. And by the way, through companies like 5R and Upwork, I've met a lot of those guys and gals from Pakistan and Thailand and Poland. And these guys are so with it in university degree just have nothing to do with their smarts. And we'll need them. But I like that. But how do you get that status to work? Well, get somebody that knows how to influence. And I'll start talking about some of these young people that knows how to influence, that says these pathways are just as cool as the other ones. And in fact, anybody, my son, his first 2 years at university were at home. You know, he studied finance and IT at home for 2 years at COVID. He has no idea why the university is relevant to the job he has right now. He did it for a tick. Whereas if I talk to people that actually have been taught by people that have been there and done that in any of their practical skills, They have that mentorship throughout the program. That is just beyond education that we could give in the university, which is, and I think about universities. Who's teaching in universities? A lot of PhDs, a lot of masters who have not been out in the world. And so even in the business school, which you'd like to see the application, learning marketing from somebody that's a professor of marketing but has never actually marketed anything is not useful. Anyway, I can chat about everything. What other things besides those? Back room? Anybody? Gotta watch my time. 2 minutes, we better hurry. We'll go here. Develop, quick. Develop. Stop, start. Right, listen, our youngest person in the room is speaking. Because she knows how to use her voice. That's what people, anyway, you go.
So assuming that the current generation of apprentices learn the same as past generations of apprentices.
Now, absolutely not. You do not have to memorize. You do not have to know bodies of knowledge. You have to know how to query it. And if anybody is not on ChatGPT or its equivalent, I urge you to do that because it really develops your questioning mind. The way that you access information is literally that, but the way that you can question, it's the question. Socrates told us, it's the question. It's not the content. Anyway.
Yeah, something to start doing as well is probably, we were talking a lot about how, like, you try to hold someone accountable, but then they interpret it as bullying. Probably we had a few different points, but actually like looking at the meanings of the words and what does bullying look like, what does accountability look like, and bringing all the generations on the same page.
And agreeing. I'm going to go back to Carolyn again. Carolyn, I worked for Carolyn. Carolyn and I are going to start giving each other feedback both ways. Hey, that style worked, that didn't. And you're going to give me total permission. In fact, the younger people in my life have been the best mentors for me. And I gave them full permission to tell me what was bullying and what was not. And I'm going to move fast. Here's mental health. What's mental health over here?
To stop coddling and allowing our younger people to experience failure. And hand in hand with that, to actually start giving them the tools of support and self-reflection tools to be able to overcome that failure.
Yeah, and in Silicon Valley, you had to have failures in your experience to get money. People want to know where you have failed and where you have come back. It's so important. It's so important. I've learned the most from probably most people in this room from business failures and personal failures and everything else. Still standing, still resonant. What else? We'll give one more idea and then I'll bring it together.
I think we need to start to acknowledge that mental health is a thing.
Yeah.
And I've got children in their 20s and they talk about mental health and depression all the time amongst themselves. Yeah. It's a thing and it's normal to talk about, and so we need to bring it into the open. So I think that's really
totally
important.
Normal. Thank you.
Yeah. It's normal. I didn't want to use the word normal, but yeah, it's normal for them to discuss.
No, it's part of our life.
Absolutely.
It is part of our life. The way we live today, it's part of our life. Our brains aren't coping. But my hope is that we will start finding better ways to cope. And it's either going back to that isolation or going to ingenuity. Now, let me just finish. Oh, I've got 0. Okay. Let me take 1 or 2 minutes. I want to do this with ChatGPT tonight. So, okay, I said, hey, and I did it back there, right? I said, tell me about a future scenario where we can come up with somebody that we're going to help. And I came up with a few, but I'll give Jason some of them. So I've got Taylor. The story is from paddocks to passwords. Taylor's 16. She's the 4th generation of sheep and grain farmers in rural New South Wales. Her brother stayed on the land, but Taylor was different. Quiet, curious, obsessed with the drone that helped spot sick animals across the property. When a malware attacked and wiped out this drone software, Taylor was furious and fascinated. Who could have done it? Could she learn to stop happening so it wouldn't happen again? Her career advisor didn't have an idea what to do with the student. The printed pamphlet said admin assistant, early child care, no mention of cybersecurity. But Taylor stumbled on a TikTok, and this is the Sydney plumber chick called Yana Marks. an Aussie woman tradie who made plumbing look fierce and technical and glamorous. So she wasn't in cyber, Jana wasn't, but she showed Taylor that she could be practical and powerful. And Taylor followed that trail to, let's make it up, Trialcraft, a gamified platform that matched her curiosity and problem-solving skills to a cyber apprenticeship in infrastructure. I don't even know what that is, infrastructure protection. And she now monitors smart sensors for regional towns, protecting water pumps, grain silos, and local council systems from ransomware. I had to look that one up. She's becoming the cyber shepherd of the farming community and posts videos helping other rural teens see what's possible. That's what you've got to do. I want you to do it tonight. You can work with artificial intelligence, and you can start opening your minds up. We baby boomers and Generation X, who are predominantly in this room, got a few Generation Ys and a few Generation 1 generations, we need to learn, and it's there, the tools are there. And so I really invite us to really understand that we are at a choice point. We can continue our way down to isolation, or we can go toward ingenuity. Thank you for your attention.